The dust swirled like a ghostly veil across the empty streets of Redemption, Wyoming, as Felicity Turner clutched her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, each painful step a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. The year was 1876, and the West was no place for a woman with a twisted leg, especially one whose own family had declared her a burden not worth bearing. The setting sun cast long shadows across the muddy Main Street as Felicity limped toward the stagecoach office. Each step sent jolts of pain up her left side, the result of a childhood fever that had left her leg permanently damaged. Her once loving family had tolerated her condition for 22 years, but when her father died and her brother took over the family ranch, everything changed. "You'll be better off in Denver," her brother had said just yesterday, pressing the stage ticket into her trembling hand. "There are charitable institutions for people like you there." What he meant was clear enough: people like her were not welcome anymore. Tears blurred her vision as she approached the ticket window. The stagecoach wasn't due until tomorrow morning, leaving her with nowhere to spend the night. She had exactly $3.42 to her name, all her brother had generously provided. "Excuse me, miss." "The office is closing for the night." Felicity turned to see a weathered clerk locking the door. "Please," she said, her voice catching. "The stage to Denver, it leaves tomorrow." 8 o'clock sharp, he confirmed, barely looking at her. His eyes flicked briefly to her leg, then away. "You can wait inside tomorrow morning, but we're closed now." "I don't," she began, but he had already turned away, keys jingling in his hand. Panic rose in her chest as she scanned the street. The saloon was no place for a respectable woman, and the hotel charged 50 cents a night, money she needed for food during her journey. The church was her only option, though she knew the pastor and his wife would ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. As she turned toward the small white building at the end of the street, a commotion erupted from the saloon. The batwing doors burst open, and a man stumbled out, followed by another who seemed intent on continuing whatever disagreement had begun inside. "I warned you about cheating in my establishment, Quincy," shouted the saloon keeper from the doorway. The man called Quincy straightened to his full height, well over 6 feet, and adjusted his hat. "I don't cheat, Barton. Never have, never will." Felicity froze, torn between fear of the confrontation and the need to continue toward the church. She took a step back, but her bad leg betrayed her, and she stumbled, letting out an involuntary cry of pain as she fell hard against a hitching post. Both men turned at the sound. The saloon keeper merely glanced her way before disappearing back inside, but the other man, Quincy, approached with steady, purposeful steps. "Madam, are you all right?" His voice was deep but gentle, nothing like the angry tone he'd used moments ago. Felicity struggled to regain her footing, embarrassment burning her cheeks. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, though she was far from it. He stood a respectful distance away, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun. Now that he was closer, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps no more than 28, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a tan vest. The badge pinned to his vest caught her attention. "You're the marshal?" she asked, surprised. A slight smile crossed his face. "Deputy Marshal Quincy Lawson at your service." He tipped his hat. "And you look like you could use some help." "I don't need," she began automatically, then stopped. The truth was, she desperately needed help. Quincy's eyes, a startling shade of blue in his sun-bronzed face, moved to her leg, then back to her face without a trace of pity or disgust, a refreshing change from what she was accustomed to. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "The stage leaves for Denver tomorrow morning, and She hesitated, pride warring with necessity. "I have nowhere to stay tonight." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Let me help you to Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house. She'll give you a room for the night." "I can't afford, consider it official business," he said, cutting her off. "Mrs. Abernathy owes me a favor anyway." Felicity hesitated. She'd learned long ago that people rarely offered help without expecting something in return. But the genuine concern in his eyes and the approaching darkness left her few options. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'm Felicity Turner." "Miss Turner," he acknowledged with another tip of his hat. "May I?" He offered his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his sleeve. As they began walking, she noticed how he slowed his pace to match hers, never once making her feel rushed or inadequate. "If you don't mind my asking," he said as they made their way down the street, "what's waiting for you in Denver?" The question struck her like a physical blow. What was waiting for her? Nothing and no one, just a city where she could disappear among other unfortunates. "I don't know," she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. "My brother suggested there might be opportunities there." Quincy's sidelong glance told her he understood more than she'd said. "Family can be complicated," he offered. "They made it very simple, actually," she replied, bitterness creeping into her voice. "I'm no use on a ranch with this leg, so I've been reassigned." They stopped in front of a neat two-story house with lace curtains in the windows. A small sign identified it as Abernathy Boarding House Clean Rooms, Christian Values. "Wait here," Quincy said, releasing her arm. "Let me speak with Mrs. Abernathy." As he walked up the steps and knocked on the door, Felicity fought the urge to flee. Part of her wanted to refuse his charity, to show her family she could manage on her own. But where would she go? The night was growing colder, and the streets of Redemption were no place for a woman alone after dark. The door opened, and a short, plump woman with gray-streaked hair appeared. She and Quincy conversed briefly, her expression changing from annoyed to concerned as he spoke. She looked past him to where Felicity stood, then nodded emphatically. Quincy returned, satisfaction evident in his face. "It's arranged. Mrs. Abernathy has a room for you tonight, and she's throwing in breakfast before the stage leaves." "I can't accept." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "Consider it Redemption's way of saying farewell to a citizen." "But I'm not. Everyone passing through becomes part of a town, even if only for a night," he said, offering his arm again to help her up the steps. Mrs. Abernathy greeted her with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Come in, dear. You must be exhausted." The boarding house smelled of baked bread and clean linen. After the dust and despair of the day, it felt like stepping into another world. Mrs. Abernathy led her to a small but immaculate room on the first floor. "The deputy explained your situation," she said kindly. "This room's easier for those with difficulty on stairs." Felicity felt tears threatening again. Such a simple consideration, yet it meant everything. "Thank you," she whispered. "Supper's in 20 minutes if you'd care to join us," Mrs. Abernathy continued. "Nothing fancy, just beef stew and biscuits." After she left, Felicity sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the stranger's kindness. She'd grown so accustomed to being treated as a burden that simple decency felt foreign. She washed her face in the basin provided, smoothed her hair, and straightened her plain gray dress as best she could before making her way to the dining room. Several other boarders were already seated, two elderly women who appeared to be sisters, a traveling salesman who couldn't stop talking about his remarkable patent medicines, and to her surprise, Deputy Marshal Lawson. He stood when she entered, pulling out a chair for her. "Mrs. Abernathy insisted I stay for supper," he explained, noting her questioning look. The meal was simple but delicious, the first real food Felicity had eaten since the previous day. As the others chatted, she found herself studying Quincy. Unlike most men she'd known, he listened more than he spoke, offering thoughtful responses rather than dominating the conversation. When one of the elderly sisters mentioned her arthritic hands, he shared a remedy his grandmother had taught him, involving willow bark and honey. "A lawman and a medicine man," Felicity observed quietly when the others became engaged in discussion about the merits of Denver versus San Francisco. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Just picking up wisdom where I can find it." Out here, knowing a little about a lot can keep you alive. How long have you been in redemption? She asked. Almost 2 years, he replied. Came here from Kansas after. He paused. After some trouble there, redemption seemed like a good place for a fresh start. She wanted to ask about the trouble but sensed it wasn't something he wished to discuss. Instead, she said, "Is it? A place for redemption, I mean." His eyes met hers, serious now. "It can be for those willing to fight for it." After supper, as the others retired to their rooms, Quincy lingered. "The stage leaves at 8, he said. "I'll come by to escort you." "That's not necessary," she protested. "Maybe not," he agreed, "but I'd like to if you'll permit it." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. It had been a long time since anyone had shown genuine interest in her welfare. "Thank you," she said. "I would appreciate that." He tipped his hat and bid her good night. As she prepared for bed in her small room, Felicity found herself wondering what might have happened if she'd met someone like Quincy Lawson before her family had decided to cast her out. Perhaps her life would have taken a different path. Sleep came quickly, but her dreams were troubled visions of the Denver stage pulling away without her, of her brother's cold face as he told her she was no longer welcome, of endless roads leading nowhere. She woke before dawn, her leg aching more than usual, a combination of yesterday's fall and changing weather. Rising carefully, she dressed and packed her meager belongings. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drifted under her door, reminding her that at least she would leave redemption with a full stomach. Mrs. Abernathy was bustling about the kitchen when Felicity emerged. "Good morning, dear. Sit, sit. You'll need a proper meal for your journey." Breakfast was generous eggs, bacon, biscuits with honey and strong coffee. As she ate, Felicity found herself wishing she could stay longer in this welcoming place, but reality couldn't be denied. Her ticket was for today's stage, and her future, whatever it might hold, awaited in Denver. At precisely 7:30, a knock came at the front door. Mrs. Abernathy answered it, and Quincy's deep voice carried to the kitchen. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Morning, Miss Turner," he greeted her. "Ready for your journey?" "No," she wanted to say. "I'm not ready at all." Instead, she nodded and rose from the table. "As ready as I'll ever be." Mrs. Abernathy pressed a small package into her hands. "Just some biscuits and jerky for the road. The stage food is terrible if they provide any at all." Felicity thanked her warmly, touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. As Quincy picked up her small carpet bag, she felt a pang of regret. These strangers had shown her more kindness in one night than her family had in years. Outside, the morning was clear and cool, the street already busy with people starting their day. Quincy walked beside her, matching his pace to hers without comment. At the stage office, he set down her bag and seemed to hesitate. "Miss Turner," he began, then stopped, as if reconsidering his words. "Yes," she prompted, curious about his suddenly serious expression. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said carefully, "and I'd like to propose an alternative." Her heart skipped a beat. "An alternative?" "Yes." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Redemption needs a schoolteacher." Of all the things she might have expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. "A schoolteacher, but I'm not, can you read and write?" he interrupted. "Of course," she answered, somewhat offended by the question. Her father had believed in education, even for daughters, and had hired tutors for her and her sisters. "Can you do sums? Know your history?" "Yes, but then you're qualified," he stated firmly. "More qualified than anyone else in town, at least." "Our last teacher left 3 months ago to get married, and the children have been running wild ever since." Felicity stared at him, trying to process this unexpected turn. "Why would you offer this to me? You don't know anything about me." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I know enough. I know you've been dealt a hard hand but haven't let it embitter you. I know you're well-spoken and educated, and I know this town needs someone who won't run off at the first opportunity." "And you think I won't? Because of my leg?" Anger flared briefly. "No," he said quietly. "Because you need a home as much as redemption needs a teacher." The simple truth of his words struck her deeply. A home, was it possible? The position comes with a small house behind the schoolhouse, he continued. The pay isn't much $40 a month, but it's enough to live on here. The town council would never agree to hire someone like me, she said, voicing her biggest doubt. Let me worry about the council, he replied. Most of them have children who have been tearing up the town since Miss Holloway left. They're desperate. The stagecoach rolled into view down the street, a cloud of dust announcing its arrival. Decision time was upon her. What about my ticket? She asked, grasping at practical concerns. I'll refund it personally if they won't, he promised. But I need your answer now, Miss Turner. She looked at his earnest face, then at the approaching stagecoach. Denver represented uncertainty, loneliness, and likely poverty. Redemption offered at least a chance at something better. Yes, she said, the word barely audible even to herself. I didn't quite catch that, Quincy said, leaning closer. She straightened her shoulders, newfound determination flowing through her. Yes, Deputy Lawson, I accept your offer. His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. You won't regret it, Miss Turner. The stagecoach pulled up with a screech of brakes and jingling harnesses. The driver jumped down, calling, Denver Stage. All aboard who's going? Not today, Quincy told him, handing Felicity's ticket back to the agent who had emerged from the office. Miss Turner has decided to make Redemption her home. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Quincy introduced her to Mayor Simmons, a portly man with a magnificent mustache, who seemed so relieved at the prospect of a new teacher that he barely glanced at her leg. The town council was hastily assembled, and though a few members expressed concerns about her condition, Quincy's firm advocacy combined with the desperate need won the day. By noon, she was the official school teacher of Redemption, with classes to begin the following Monday. Quincy escorted her to her new home, a small but sturdy two-room structure behind the schoolhouse. It was sparsely furnished but clean, with a bed, table, 2 chairs, a small cookstove, and even a bookshelf with a few volumes left by the previous teacher. It's not much, he apologized, setting her bag down. It's perfect, she replied honestly. After years of feeling unwelcome in her family's home, this humble space represented freedom. Mrs. Abernathy will help you get settled, he said. And I took the liberty of asking around for some basic supplies. The general store will deliver them this afternoon. You've done so much, Felicity said, overwhelmed by his kindness. How can I ever repay you? His expression softened. Seeing this town have a proper school again is payment enough. These children deserve a chance at education. As he turned to leave, she called after him, Deputy Lawson. He paused at the door. Yes, thank you for believing in me when no one else would. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Everyone deserves someone who believes in them, Miss Turner. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. The schoolhouse needed cleaning, books needed organizing, and lessons needed planning. Word spread quickly about the new teacher, and several mothers brought their children to meet her. Though she noticed curious glances at her leg, no one mentioned it directly, for which she was grateful. Quincy stopped by daily, ostensibly to check on her progress, but often bringing small gifts, wildflowers for her table, a jar of honey from a local farmer, a handmade bookstand to make reading easier while standing. Each visit lasted a little longer than the one before, their conversations ranging from teaching methods to local history to their own pasts. She learned he had lost his parents young and been raised by his grandmother in Kansas. He'd briefly ridden with a group of bounty hunters before deciding law enforcement was a more honorable path. The trouble he'd mentioned was a confrontation with a corrupt sheriff that had forced him to leave Kansas quickly. In turn, she told him about growing up on her family's ranch, about the fever that had damaged her leg when she was 8, about her father's kindness and her brother's cruelty. Talking about these things was painful but also cathartic. Quincy listened without judgment, his steady presence a comfort she came to rely on. The Sunday before school was to begin, he invited her to dinner at the town's only restaurant. It wasn't a formal establishment, just the back room of the bakery where Mrs. Peterson served roast beef on Sundays, but it was the closest thing to courtship Felicity had ever experienced. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked as they ate. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I can't control the children? What if they don't respect me because of—" She gestured vaguely toward her leg. "Children are more accepting than adults," he said confidently. "They'll judge you on fairness and whether your lessons are interesting, not on how you walk." "I hope you're right. I know I am." He reached across the table and briefly covered her hand with his. "You're going to be wonderful." His touch sent warmth spreading through her. No man had ever touched her with such casual affection before, as if her disability didn't matter at all. That night, she slept poorly, anticipation and anxiety battling in her mind. When morning came, she dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark blue cotton with white collar and cuffs, and pinned her hair in a neat bun. Looking in the small mirror, she practiced her sternest teacher expression, then laughed at herself. "They're children, not outlaws," she reminded herself. At precisely 8 o'clock, she rang the school bell. Children began arriving, some eager, some reluctant, all curious about the new teacher. By 1:15, 23 pupils ranging from 6 to 16 years old had assembled in the schoolhouse. As she introduced herself, Felicity was acutely aware of her limping gait as she moved before the class. Some of the younger children stared openly, but none made comments. The older ones affected indifference, testing boundaries with whispers and passed notes. The morning was challenging, establishing order, assessing abilities and sorting students into appropriate groups. By lunchtime, she was exhausted but determined not to show weakness. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Felicity was surprised to see Quincy approaching, carrying a small basket. "Thought you might need sustenance," he said, presenting it to her. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, and a jar of lemonade. "You're a lifesaver," she said gratefully, suddenly realizing how hungry she was. "But don't you have deputy duties? Keeping an eye on the schoolyard is deputy duty," he replied with a wink. "How's it going? Better than I feared, worse than I hoped," she admitted. "The Williams twins are going to be trouble, and Sarah Hendricks refuses to read aloud, but most of them seem willing to learn," he nodded approvingly. "First days are always the hardest. It gets easier." As they talked, she noticed several children watching them curiously. No doubt town gossip had already linked the deputy and the new teacher romantically. The thought made her blush. The afternoon went more smoothly, and by dismissal time, Felicity felt she had established at least the beginnings of respect. As the last child departed, she collapsed into her chair, her leg throbbing painfully. She was massaging it gingerly when a knock came at the door. Quincy stood there, hat in hand, concern evident in his expression. "Bad day?" he asked, nodding toward her leg. "Just tired," she replied, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. "Nothing unusual." He entered, closing the door behind him. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside her desk. She nodded, curious about his suddenly serious demeanor. "I want to tell you something," he began, sitting down. "Something I've observed today." Her heart sank. "Had she failed so visibly on her first day, I watched you with those children," he continued. "Saw how you moved among them, how you knelt beside little Emma Peters even though it must have hurt, how you never once used your condition as an excuse or let it stop you from doing what needed doing." He paused, his blue eyes intense. "And I realized something important." "What's that?" she asked, barely breathing. "You walk perfect beside me," he said simply. Felicity stared at him, uncomprehending. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, leaning forward, "that I've never met anyone who carries themselves with more grace or dignity despite hardship. Your family cast you out for what they saw as weakness, but all I see is strength." Tears filled her eyes at his words. "Quincy, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. I'm not asking for anything right now except permission to court you properly." Joy and disbelief warred within her. "You want to court me, But my leg has nothing to do with who you are, he interrupted firmly. The woman I want to court is the one who faced down 23 unruly children today without flinching. The one who didn't let her family's cruelty break her spirit. The one who lights up a room just by entering it. Tears spilled onto her cheeks. No one has ever seen me that way before. Then everyone else has been blind, he said simply. He reached out, taking her hand in his. So, Miss Turner, may I have the honor of calling on you officially? Through her tears, she smiled. Yes, Deputy Lawson, I would like that very much. And so began Felicity's new life in redemption. The weeks passed quickly, filled with teaching duties and increasingly frequent evenings in Quincy's company. They shared meals at Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house, attended church socials together, and took slow walks around town on Sunday afternoons. With each passing day, her limp seemed less pronounced, not because it was improving, but because she was carrying herself with newfound confidence. The children, as Quincy had predicted, adjusted quickly to their teacher's disability. After the initial curiosity wore off, they seemed to forget about it entirely, judging her instead on her fairness, knowledge, and willingness to listen. One crisp October afternoon, as Felicity was dismissing her class, she noticed an expensive carriage stopped outside the schoolhouse. Her heart froze when she recognized the man stepping down from it, her brother, William. She hadn't heard from her family since the day they'd sent her away. What could he want now? The children scattered as William approached, his expression unreadable. He looked prosperous in his fine suit, but the hardness in his eyes hadn't changed. Felicity, he said stiffly, I've come to bring you home. She stared at him, unable to process his words. Home? Yes, he said impatiently. Mother is unwell and we need someone to care for her. I've made arrangements. Anger flared within her. Arrangements like you made when you sent me away, his face tightened. That was a mistake. We've been short-handed and Mother misses you. Translation, they needed unpaid help and she was the cheapest solution. No, she said firmly. No. William repeated, clearly unused to being refused. Don't be ridiculous. You can't possibly prefer this. He gestured dismissively at the schoolhouse and the town beyond. To your family home. This is my home now, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I have a position here, responsibilities, people who respect me, he laughed harshly. Respect, a crippled schoolteacher in a backwater town, don't delude yourself, sister. Is there a problem here? Quincy's voice cut through the tension as he approached, his badge catching the afternoon sunlight. William turned, annoyed at the interruption. Family business, Lawman, nothing that concerns you. Anything that concerns Miss Turner concerns me, Quincy replied calmly, coming to stand beside Felicity. She felt strength flowing into her from his presence. This is my brother, William Turner, she explained. He's come to take me back to the family ranch against your wishes. Quincy asked, his tone still conversational but with an edge of steel beneath. Yes, she confirmed. I have no desire to return. William's face darkened. This is absurd. She's my sister and she belongs with her family. The same family that cast her out. Quincy inquired, his voice dangerously soft now. The family that decided she wasn't worth keeping until they needed something from her? How dare you, William began. No, how dare you, Quincy interrupted, taking a step forward. Miss Turner has built a life here. She's respected, valued, and loved. If she chooses to stay, no one, not even family, has the right to force her to leave. The word loved hung in the air between them. Quincy had never spoken it before, and hearing it now in this context made Felicity's heart soar despite the tense situation. William looked from Quincy to Felicity, reassessing the situation. I see, he said coldly. You found yourself a protector. How convenient. I found myself, Felicity corrected him. Quincy simply helped me see what I was capable of all along. Her brother's lips thinned to a hard line. And what about Mother? Hire a nurse, she suggested. The ranch has always turned a profit. Surely you can spare the expense for our mother's care. William stared at her for a long moment as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, he gave a curt nod. As you wish. I'll tell Mother you've decided to stay in this place. Tell her I'm happy, Felicity said softly. That's all she ever wanted for me anyway. Without another word, William turned and walked back to his carriage. As it pulled away, Felicity felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, the last remnants of her old life releasing their hold. Quincy's hand found hers, warm and reassuring. Are you all right? She nodded, surprised to find it was true. Better than all right, actually. I feel free. He smiled, that special smile that seemed reserved just for her. Free looks good on you, Miss Turner. About what you said, she began hesitantly. When you told my brother I was loved here, a flush crept up his neck. I meant it, he said quietly. I love you, Felicity. I think I have since that first day when you stood in the street looking lost but determined. Joy bubbled up inside her. I love you too, Quincy, more than I ever thought possible. He gathered her hands in his. Then would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't offer you wealth or an easy life, but I can promise to walk beside you always, to see you for who you truly are, and to love you with everything I am. Yes, she whispered, tears of happiness filling her eyes. 1,000 times yes. They were married that December in the small church, with the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Abernathy cried louder than anyone, declaring it the most romantic thing she'd ever witnessed. The school children formed an honor guard, throwing flower petals as the newlyweds emerged into the winter sunshine. Felicity continued teaching, now as Mrs. Lawson, while Quincy served as deputy. The following spring, the marshal retired, and Quincy was appointed to take his place. They moved into the marshal's house, a comfortable 4-room structure near the center of town, and began talking about starting a family. Life wasn't always easy. Felicity's leg pained her on cold or rainy days, and Quincy's job occasionally put him in danger. But they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from their love and the community that had embraced them both. On their first anniversary, as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, Quincy presented her with a carved walking stick, a beautiful piece made from polished oak, topped with a silver handle. Not because you need it, he explained as she examined it, but because even the strongest among us sometimes welcome a little support. She leaned against him, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? If my family hadn't cast me out if I'd gotten on that stage to Denver. I try not to dwell on what might have been, he replied, his arm tightening around her. But I do believe some things are meant to be. We found each other when we both needed someone most. My family thought my lameness made me worthless, she mused. They couldn't see beyond it. Their loss, Quincy said simply, but I meant what I said that day in the schoolhouse, and I still believe it with all my heart. What's that? He turned to her, his eyes filled with love. You walk perfect beside me, Felicity. Always have, always will. As the last rays of sun painted the sky in brilliant orange and gold, Felicity knew she had found her true redemption not in a place, but in the love of a man who saw beyond her limitations to the woman she really was. Together, they had created a life neither of them had dared to dream of, proving that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with a single, imperfect step.